My name's Hannah. I work at South Yorkshire Housing Association in the Marketing and Communications department. So today this presentation is going to give you sort of an overview of who we are, what we do, why we do it, and it's also going to specify on 3 key areas that we're focusing on at the minute as an organisation and as a sector, and that's going to hopefully inspire you in your work that you'll be working on in the next few weeks. So before I start with the presentation, I just wanted to get a little sense of how many people either have heard of a housing association or have heard of South Yorkshire Housing Association. So if you could just pop your hand in the air so I can get a sense. Okay, so 1 person's heard about a housing association. That's fine, because when I started working at SYHA, I'd never heard of a housing association either. So basically, housing associations exist all across the country, and they also exist in Scotland and Wales as well. We're independent organisations, and basically in a nutshell what we do is we provide homes for people. The National Housing Federation gives a really good summary, so I'll just quickly describe that for you. So housing associations are independent, not-for-profit companies set up to provide affordable homes for people in housing need. They vary in size from fewer than 10 homes to more than 50,000 homes. And in addition to providing homes for people, housing associations are really amazing organisations in the sense that they do loads of other things as well. So quite often they'll do different schemes that are around health. So we offer all sorts of different things that can help people improve their well-being and all that kind of thing. So what does social housing look like? Has anyone got a sense of what it might look like? No? If you've never heard of it, you probably won't. So this is one of our schemes in Barnsley. It's one of our newest estates. It's for people, it's for families, it's for older people, it's for people that live on their own. This is another estate in Maltby, and this is one of our newest estates, and it's a specific type of design in that it's really energy efficient. As housing associations, we care a lot about innovation and making sure that the homes we build are, first of all, good quality, but also good for the planet as well. That's another example of some homes that are down south in sort of the Norfolk area. So when a lot of people say social housing, you might think of sort of tall tower council buildings, things like that, and they definitely do exist, but across the country it's not all like that. So I was talking a little bit about who housing associations provide homes for, but I thought I'd just introduce you to a few of our customers and our tenants so you can get a sense of the type of people that live in our homes. So this is Sue and Grace. So before Sue moved into social housing, she lived in London. She worked in quite a high up position in a bank. She would be running up and down the country all the time, doing all sorts of different things. And then when she decided that she was going to have a child, she decided that she wanted her life to change. She wanted a more stable lifestyle. She wanted somewhere safe for her daughter to grow up. And so she decided to move to Sheffield, and that's how she ended up living in one of our homes. She lives in Maltby, in one of the homes that I showed you earlier. And Sue's really great. She does a lot for a community. She does a craft club with all the kids after school one night. She's really great. This is Pam and Mick, and they live in Doncaster in one of our homes. So 12 years ago, both of them lived in a home that they owned. So they'd bought their own house. And then all of a sudden, Mick became ill, and Pam was really worried about the fact that they were going to lose their home. They only had 1 mortgage payment left before their home would have been taken off them when they got the call to say that they had a new bungalow with us in social housing. So yeah, they're really happy now. They've lived there for 12 years. This is a bit of a blurred photo of Terry, unfortunately, but this is Terry. So I mentioned earlier that housing associations do more than just provide a home for people, and a big part of South Yorkshire Housing Association, in fact 60% of our business, is providing services in a care and supported setting. So Terry is a vet. She's a registered vet, and a few years ago she became quite unwell, so unwell in fact that she was sent to live miles and miles away from Sheffield in sort of a psychiatric ward, away from her friends and family, away from everything she'd ever known about living in Sheffield. And she was left there basically. And through a scheme that South Yorkshire Housing Association runs, she was able to return back to Sheffield and move into a home, one of our homes. And we run that service in partnership with the NHS, and it's all about reaching people who have been taken out of Sheffield due to their mental health and actually bringing them back. Because we know that a safe home is fundamental to your health and well-being, and if we can provide that for people, we do. So yeah, that's Terry. This is Majed. This is a screenshot from a YouTube video that we did quite recently. So Majed lives in Sheffield, not too far away from here with his family. He moved to this country an awfully long time ago now and moved into social housing, one of our homes. He is the most amazing guy. He works as a manager at Poundland, and even though he's not Christian, he's Muslim, he celebrates Christmas every year and absolutely loves it. And so this is just an example of all the different types of people that live in our homes. We've got older people, younger people, families, individuals, and people that might need extra support with their health and well-being, all sorts of different things. So that's our customers. So I mentioned earlier that there's sort of going to be a brief that you'll get with 3 different main areas in it. And the first of these is homelessness. So South Yorkshire Housing Association was set up in 1972, and like many of the housing associations across the country, it was set up at a time where a film called Cathy Come Home had come out. So you might not have heard of this film. I hadn't heard of it before I started working here. But it's basically a pioneering film that came out in the 70s, and it shows the story of a young family who went through a number of challenges that meant that they lost their home. And basically, the outrage that this film caused led to the development of housing associations. You know, people said this isn't acceptable. We should be looking after people. People should have access to a safe home. So, like many organisations, we were set up during that era, and it remains one of our main motivations and priorities as a housing association now. So I don't know, I'm sure lots of you all sort of walk around Sheffield and you'll probably see that visible homelessness has risen a huge amount over the past few years. 600 people across the country died living on the streets last year, and there's currently 300,000 people that live in sort of hidden homelessness. So that might be hostels, refuges, it might be on sofas, it might be in sort of bed and breakfasts, things like that. And in that number, there are an awful lot of children that are living in temporary accommodation too. So homelessness is a huge challenge for this sector at the moment, and the country, in fact. We went to a conference yesterday, myself and Hannah, and the new chief exec of the National Housing Federation said that if it wasn't for Brexit, housing would probably be, the thing that we would be hearing about all the time in the news. And another thing, actually, is the idea that people in society often consider that homelessness is this uncontrollable thing that we have no power over fixing. But actually that is quite a significant myth. The homelessness charity Crisis, so they're a national charity who work to end homelessness, and last year they announced a plan about ending homelessness once and for all, and there's a book about this big, it's like the Yellow Pages back in the day, and it's basically a plan that outlines the way in which that we can end homelessness in this country. So one of the things you might want to consider is how do we perceive homelessness as a country? Do people think that it's something that we can't avoid, or actually is it time that we started speaking more about the solutions, because we do know how to end homelessness? So that leads me on to tell you a little bit about the organisation Homes for Cathy. So I mentioned the film Cathy Come Home earlier, and when I first started working at South Yorkshire Housing Association, I started off in a role that was marking the 50th anniversary of the film. And the reason we were marking that anniversary is because we wanted to show sort of the country that actually things are worse now than they were 50 years ago in terms of homelessness, which is really shocking. So Homes for Cathy is an organisation that was set up by a number of housing associations from all across the country, and they're set up in the aim to sort of give housing associations a bit of a shake and a bit of a kick up the bum, and to say to people, this is our priority, this is why we were set up. It was to provide people with homes. We shouldn't have 300,000 people without a home in our country. So this organisation was set up to just to sort of raise the voice again about homelessness and what we can do. So yeah, that's a really interesting organisation to check out. We're one of the leading organisations within that. We've done a couple of conferences. I mentioned Crisis. We've done some conferences with them. We've also this year, through this group, done a regional conference with Dan Jarvis, who is the mayor at the moment. So yeah, lots of talk about that at the moment, which is one of our priorities and one of the briefs to consider. So the second topic that I'm going to be talking to you about today is loneliness. And loneliness probably might not be the first thing that springs to mind when you think about housing associations and homes and things like that. But loneliness, as I'm sure you've probably seen, has risen up the political agenda in the past 10 years. In fact, 10 years ago, people wouldn't have really been speaking about loneliness and the impact that it has on our health. But as a housing association, we care more about, well, we care equally about the fact that people can live well in their home, as we do about making sure that people have a home. So, you know, the home is the first place and the foundation that we provide, but actually we provide a huge range of support as well to help people with things like loneliness, for example. You might have heard that we're the first country in the world to have a minister for loneliness, which is staggering. Quite a significant thing to have happened to us, and it just shows the extent of the impact of loneliness upon people, and not just necessarily people that are older as well. You might have seen about the impact that loneliness can have on young people our age, social media, things like that. So that's one of the things that we're working on as a housing association to make change in Sheffield. We're doing that through something called Age Better in Sheffield. And Age Better in Sheffield is a national lottery funded project. So it happens all across the country. There's 14 different organisations. So there's Age Better in Sheffield, there's Ageing Better Bristol, there's Age Better Middlesbrough, all different organisations that received around about £6 million from the big lottery in order to deliver programmes that would help to improve loneliness for people across the country. So the work that we do focuses specifically on those that are aged 50 and older in Sheffield. And what we do is we partner with organisations like Sheffield Mind, Ignite Imaginations, all sorts of amazing organisations in Sheffield that are already doing loads of good work. And we work with them in order to deliver projects such as help with transport. So a big thing for people that are over 50 is that, you know, if you can't get out and about, that's really difficult in order to meet with people, things like that. We have projects around wellbeing counselling. So if people have potentially just lost a loved one, or if they've recently retired and have suddenly had this huge life change and they can't cope with that, we offer one-to-one counselling. It's all free. Everything we offer is free. We also, at the moment, we're looking at Sheffield becoming an ageing friendly city as well. So doing all sorts of work to basically help make Sheffield a city we can be proud to grow older in, but also to raise the awareness of loneliness and to help people become connected. So something that I'll mention whilst I'm talking about Age Better in Sheffield is that when we first started delivering the programme, there was this big emphasis around, you know, there's 12,000 people that are lonely in Sheffield. Loneliness can be as detrimental for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, all these kinds of really shocking statistics. But the more we've gone through the programme, we've sort of shifted the way in which we talk about loneliness and the language that we use. So one example might be, instead of saying Bob is really lonely, what we would say is there are a number of different ways that Bob can become connected within his society again. He could speak to his neighbours, he could join a group, all that kind of thing. So instead of talking about the real sad impacts of loneliness, which definitely happen and are important, we talk more now about connections. You know, what do we actually need in society? How can we make a difference? That kind of thing. And that's going to just lead me on to passing over to Hannah, who's just going to quickly talk to you about her friend next to you.
Okay, so when I joined South Yorkshire Housing Association, I didn't quite understand the extent of everything that we do. So one of the things that I've got really heavily involved with Hannah is Age Better. So I haven't been part of the other toolkits, but I was part of the final toolkit, which was really exciting and just an amazing experience. So for that, it was in Firth Park. And one of the events, we actually went to the big Asda there and tried just to kind of talk to people about the toolkit. And one of the people that we met was Cyril. And Cyril has a love of painting and photography, and that is where one of my hobbies lies. And we really just hit it off. So we then decided to arrange to go and meet him, both myself and Hannah first, as an initial visit. And from that, actually, it came that he wanted someone to pass on his skills to. And we made that good of a connection that he wanted it to be me. So for the past maybe four months now, I've been going to see Cyril every 2 weeks, and we've been learning about painting. He's been showing me his skills when it comes to watercolours, and sometimes we don't paint, we just literally sit down, have a cup of tea and a bit of a chat. So what I really wanted from you to get from this is, if you decide to do the loneliness brief, think about if you have any neighbours who maybe are elderly, or you have someone who your grandparents know that might need a friend, and go down that route of maybe going round and seeing them, knocking on, having a cup of tea and seeing if they've got any interests that are the same as yours. And then from what I'm going to be doing with Cyril is writing a blog for Age Better, so people can actually see how much of an impact it's made for Cyril, but also how much of an impact it's made on my life as well. There you go, can I have this back now?
So that's one example of, well, first of all, the action that you can take to try and help reduce loneliness and isolation, but also something that you could potentially report on, stories that you could go and look for, and there's loads and loads of this kind of thing happening. And we speak a lot about, when we come to loneliness, in terms of all these people that are alone, but actually there is so many amazing things happening that you can go and find out about, all sorts of different projects, not just Age Better in Sheffield, loads of different things that you can get involved with and find out about. So I'm also just going to share a little bit of a personal story now as well in relation to Age Better in Sheffield and ending loneliness across the country. So this time last year, I got on a train to Wigan, which is where my grandma lives, and I was on my way to a funeral. One of my grandma's best friends had died. You know those uncles that aren't really an uncle, but you call them uncle anyway? So Uncle Arthur, bless him, had died. So I was on my way to Uncle Arthur's funeral, and I got on this train and just happened to sit opposite an older gentleman that was already on the train. And as the train pulled away from the platform, another man sat down next to the man that I was opposite from, and they just started chatting, and they absolutely hit it off. And for the whole train journey, back and forth, they were chatting about their family, their friends, their loves, their different hobbies, all sorts of things, what they were doing in Liverpool that day, which is where they were going. And I wasn't involved in the conversation, I was just sort of quietly listening at the side. And it was amazing because when we talk about, reaching out to strangers and small acts of kindness through our work with Age Better in Sheffield, it was happening right there in front of me, and it was amazing to see. So before I got off the train, I just quickly scribbled a note on a bit of paper from my bag, and I just handed it to the man at the side of the train and just said, and the note basically just said, thank you for engaging just so effortlessly together and sharing your stories and being so open. And it was a bit cheeky. It was saying, if you want to come and volunteer for Age Better in Sheffield, we'd love to have you. So I gave them the letter, didn't think anything of it. And then I got to work on the following Monday morning, and I had an email in my Outlook at work. It just said "Girl on the Train," and my first thought was, oh, I'm pretty sure that's a book or a film. But anyway, what it was a reply from the man on the train that I'd handed the note to. And he was basically sharing his experiences of loneliness. He'd recently lost his wife, and he had 2 teenage children that he's still bringing up now. And he spoke a lot about the importance of connections, how Morris, who was the man that he'd spoken to that day, had really made his day. And it was just this amazing story that really summed up the power of, a small connection with somebody else and the difference we can make to people's lives just through a conversation. So I really excitedly just shared it on my Twitter account a week later, just to say, this happened and it was amazing, without thinking really anything would happen. And then a few hours later, I checked back on my Twitter and it had got like 200 likes, and it was like, oh, that's a bit cool. And then over the course of a couple of days, it was shared. It was liked 40,000 times, and it was shared all over the world, in India, America, Africa, New Zealand. People got in touch from all over, basically saying that they've had experiences that are similar to this, or they're really lonely and that they would like to experience these kinds of connections with people in society again, which is something that I think in the digital world we can lose a little bit, no matter how old we are. So yeah, it all went a bit crazy. I was on all sorts of different radio channels, and it was in American TV and all sorts of things, and it led to me doing a TED Talk at the TEDx NHS event that happened last year. And I think that just sort of really does show that despite the fact I don't work in the NHS and all the other people that did speak at the TEDx talk do work in the NHS, that this is a huge health issue for us at the moment. You know, we all need connections, no matter who we are or how old we are or what's going on in our lives. We need to sort of connect with people. So there, that's loneliness in a bit of a nutshell. So the third brief that I'm going to be talking to you about today is stereotypes. So I'm going to share a personal story actually now, which I hadn't planned to do, but anyway, I'm going for it. So I'm not originally from Sheffield, I'm from a little seaside town near Blackpool. And when I was growing up, there was this estate sort of in between Blackpool and where I lived, and it was called Grange Park. And I'd never been to Grange Park, I didn't know anything about Grange Park, but I knew that everybody else that spoke about Grange Park was like, oh, Grange Park is dodgy and there's loads of dodgy people living there and all this kind of thing. And so an opinion was formed in my mind about a place and about people that I'd never been to before. And it wasn't until I got a Saturday job working on a cheese counter that I started working with somebody who was this amazing, lovely, kind woman. And she told me, you know, oh, I've lived on Grange Park for 20 years and it's the most amazing place. There's all sorts of kind neighbours. We do events together all the time. And it was this sudden realisation that actually people had spoken about a place and shared this sort of stereotype or rumour that just wasn't true. And it was the first time for me that I thought, gosh, you know, the housing and where we live and all that kind of thing is probably portrayed actually not that well in society. And then fast forward a few more years and I'm working for South Yorkshire Housing Association on a campaign that's called See the Person, and it was previously known as Benefit to Society. And in a nutshell, this campaign is all about changing the way in which the general public and society, and especially the media, talk about social housing and those, basically anyone that lives in any kind of tenure that's, you know, not private rented or privately owned. You know, we wouldn't talk about people that own a house in any kind of derogatory way, but for some reason social housing and council housing has this negative image that we've got to do something about. So what I'd like to do is now just introduce you to Nikki, who's one of our social housing tenants. And Nikki's lived in social housing all her life. She was in the army for a little bit. She had a family quite young, and throughout her entire life social housing has been there to give her some stability, and she's amazing, and she's got loads of different jobs. She works in like a champagne bar in Doncaster, she's done stuff in schools, but the thing that she's most passionate about is volunteering for Yorkshire Ambulance Service as a community first responder. So basically what happens is that Nikki will get a phone call from somebody that says, you know, there's an emergency within 1 mile of the place that you live in, off you go, and you literally just abandon what you do and you jump in your car and you go and you're the first on scene for someone that needs your help. But there's a video which tells her story way better than I can, so I'll just show you that now.
My home is my family, my husband, my kids, my dogs. It's the place where we all grow together. Hi, my name's Nikki Rogerson and I live in social housing. I'm just sticking up for Doncaster at the minute. It's been 4.5 years now that I've done this role. I love it. I love knowing that I'm part of something that's in the community, that I can always help people. We are provided with a kit and training and a phone from Yorkshire Ambulance Service. If somebody dials 999 and there's a CFR in the close vicinity, they will be activated if they're on duty. We carry oxygen, we carry a defib, we carry basic first aid equipment. We can arrive and help assist the patient before a crew arrives. A crew will always arrive to back me up, but in those crucial minutes that I can get there quicker, then we can provide some assistance. Even though you have crews back you up, you're still arriving on your own. So it's having the confidence to walk in that door. It's having the ability to switch from one situation that you're expecting to the situation that you walk into that you're not expecting, because everything can change on the flip of a coin. I also train with my husband. We both train in jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts. I also work in a champagne bar in Doncaster Town Centre, as well as volunteering, run a family. We have 2 dogs. We enjoy time out on our motorbike as well. I do it all because why not? What's stopping me? If I want to do something, I will do it. Life's too short.
I'll come and grab you next time.
It is a hard role, and there will be ups and downs to come, but it's something that I think I can take on, and I'm looking forward to it. Social housing gave me the step up. I don't think I'd have had that chance. Hi, my name's Nikki Rogerson and I live in social housing. I'm a volunteer for the Yorkshire Ambulance Service as a community first responder. I also undertake MMA and jiu-jitsu and do ride motorbikes.
So that example is the kind of thing that's really missing in the media at the moment. And you can see from that Nikki is an amazing woman that does amazing things, but if you were to look in the media quite often, if someone was to see that she lived in social housing, you wouldn't see any of that. You would get headlines like lazy or benefit scrounger, all these kind of unfair and inaccurate descriptions of people that live in social housing. So the idea of this campaign is to show the people, to see the person, and to just sort of get conversations going that helps make a difference to those kind of negative stereotypes that exist at the moment. So this is a photo of, that's Grace from earlier, and Sue, her mum. So basically through this campaign we went to the House of Lords, and it's doing amazing work across the entire sector at the moment, but it's still quite an internal thing. So within the sector we talk about it all the time, and we say, you know, tenants, you know, their voice should be shared and all this kind of thing, but it's still transitioning between being in the sector and being in the wider world. So there's a real sort of lot of work that needs to be done in order to change public perception around that. Yeah, so that's sort of an overview of who we are, the 3 sort of key things that we're working on at the moment that you can sort of help us with. And we've also, me and Hannah, come up with a bit of an additional challenge, which I haven't mentioned to you yet. No one has to do this, but basically at this conference yesterday, the biggest thing that we took away was that there are 6 million people living in social housing across the country, but only 1 person in this room knew about it and knew about the work that we're doing. And quite often there are loads of different things that you can get involved with that in housing associations, even if you don't live in social housing. So I mentioned about the you know, the health work that we do, the work around mental health, the work around loneliness, all that sort of thing. So we're hoping to start doing some work around bridging that gap between what happens in the sector and whether or not the general public know about it. So if you had any kind of inspired ideas about campaigns or anything that we could work on maybe together, or that you could do over a short period of time in order to shout about social housing basically, we'd be really interested to work with you and to know more. So yeah, that's us.